Warning: some content discussed in this podcast can be triggering to survivors of sexual assault and difficult to hear. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Redemption Podcast with your hosts, Staci
and Julia.
Welcome to episode 1 of Redemption. This is Staci and Julia.
Good morning, Staci.
Good morning, Julia.
How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you today?
I'm bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I
Yes.
had my breakfast and my coffee.
Good. I would like to introduce our guest today. Our guest today is Michelle Overstreet. She's the founder of My House.
Hello.
Good morning, Michelle. Thank you for being here.
You're very welcome.
And we also have Isaac, who will be giving us our housekeeping.
Hey guys, happy to be here. Some quick notes before we jump into it. In the month of March, 3/11 is Sexual Assault Awareness Day, and we are doing something here at the building for that. We're doing a film showing, I believe. Also, if you are interested in some of our other podcasts, we have the first episode of the My House podcast that was out last week. And we also have the first episode of Diagnonsense out now on the My House Podcast Network channel. So go ahead and go back and take a listen to those. Second episode of the My House Podcast is coming out next week. This should be dropping on a Friday or Saturday, I think. So lots of content here from the network for everyone to be tuning into. But I'm super excited for your guys' first episode today.
Thank you, Isaac. We're excited too, and thank you so much for all of your hard work. So today's topic for our very first episode is we're going to be learning Staci's story. And Staci and I just started working together recently, and I don't know much about your story, so I'm really excited. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, we're just going to get into it.
Yeah, well, I really look forward to sharing my story. This is super important to me. This is why I even came to My House in the beginning. And so about 5 years ago, I was part of the Wasilla Chamber, and this lady came and spoke to our chamber, and she was very passionate, and she was speaking about these young homeless kids who were struggling, who had substance abuse issues, who were having overdoses with opioids, and just her passion alone and seeing her cry, it touched me deeply, and I'll tell you in a bit why, but I went over to Michelle and afterwards, and I just had to get to her. She had a line of people, and I waited my turn, and I just said to her, I said, I'm Staci, and I told her what I do, and then I said, I was homeless at 17, and I was also sex trafficked at 17, and this is a big passion of mine to help youth escape what I went through, and she had tears in her eyes, and I just told her, I said, if you ever have any position or any way I can help, please let me know. And that was 5 years ago. And
So it took us 4 years to figure out where to find the financing, the grant funding to support a position for Staci to be the director of a sex trafficking program for us. And I also didn't know when I started this 12 years ago, the depth of the insidious depth of trafficking among homeless, not just homeless in general, but particularly homeless youth. And so it really became important to have a platform to work from and somebody to advocate for those youth. I love that Staci had the lived experience. And so I'd been working with Alaska Housing, Department of Justice, a variety of places that offer grants for trafficking. And as one of the smaller, perceived smaller communities, we're actually the second largest community in Alaska in terms of population. But as a perceived smaller community, it was difficult to kind of get the data first that we needed to demonstrate that we had an issue with trafficking and then get the funding. And Alaska Housing helped us with that when we finally got to the point where we were getting in line for grants and applying. Alaska Housing through a Department of Justice grant is where that came from.
right. So I've been here at My House. This October will be my second year. And so it took me a while to get up and running and find my footing, but I think I'm finding my footing now. And
I'd say so.
And I just look forward to making a difference and just really helping youth and helping our state understand this problem and then figure out a way to help them get out of it. What I did when I was 17, I became homeless in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I ended up couch surfing for quite a few months. And then I ran into a friend of mine who is a friend of my best friend, but she was in her 30s and I was just 17. And she said, hey, instead of couch surfing, come stay with me. And I'm like, okay, thank you. That's great. And then she's like, oh, well, I work at a printing shop. So let's go. You can go to work with me at this printing shop. It'll be great, So I did. And the first couple of weeks were fine. I was learning the printing business. I would go deliver things. And I was super excited just to be on my feet, But then I got introduced there to cocaine. And the cocaine use was an everyday thing after that. And quickly got hooked on cocaine. And I lost so much weight. I think I weighed maybe 90 pounds wet at that point. But with this group of people, after a while, like after many, many months of being using cocaine freely there at the job, then they started taking me to parties and meeting these older gentlemen, and then going to underground gambling casinos and meeting that kind of clientele there. And so then we ended up going to a lot of parties, and I'd meet a lot of men, and they would ask me to do things. And my friends would say, well, you've been working here for all these months. We've been giving you all these drugs. Just go and, do whatever you need to do, because I owed them, right? That's how you get pulled into it, because you owe them. Mm-hmm. And these were supposedly my friends. They were watching out for me, and they cared about me. So I did. And so the cocaine use became more intense, and the marijuana and the drinking. And I had learned later that I was being groomed to be bought by a really big CEO, and they had 3 or 4 different ones they were trying me out with to see which one wanted to buy me. And I would have been theirs. Yeah. And I had met many ladies, quite a few, who were that type of person for them. They bought them, put them in really big, expensive apartments with cars and jewels and furs, and, they were just there. And I had no idea when I got into this that this is what this was leading to. And I came from a pretty good background, and I was really struggling. I didn't like myself. I knew this was wrong. It didn't feel good, and I was getting pretty low at that point. And then it just took me a while to realize that this wasn't good.
So how did you get out? How do you get out?
Well, like victims of sexual exploitation, we don't really know we're victims, right? We just think, I owe this person. These are my friends.
Yep.
And
they care about me.
And they cared about me, right? Well, one evening, we had a bunch of people come over to my apartment, and one was a doctor, one was like a CEO, and then they brought their women with their furs and jewels and stuff. And instead of snorting the cocaine that they always brought, they cooked something over my stove. And I don't know a lot about drugs, but I don't even know what that meant, but they cooked it and put it in a syringe, and they told me to come here, and they injected me with it. And at that point, I'm just like, I just did what I was told. So yeah, go ahead. And that's all I remember. And I woke up, I don't know how many hours later, but I woke up bruised, naked, and in a bathtub full of ice up to my chest with only my arm hanging out. It was dark and I was alone. And the first thing I thought was, oh my God, did they take an organ? Because I'd heard of organ harvesting, and it was a doctor. And so I was able to flip myself out of the bathtub, and I had to lay on the floor for I don't know how long until my body was not numb where I could move. And I was looking, and no incision, so it wasn't that. And so what I figured happened is whatever they shot into me, I must have OD'd and almost died. And I guess they just put me in ice to slow down my heart rate so that maybe I would live. But as I'm laying there, unthawing on the floor, naked and bruised and scared and in the dark alone, my thoughts were, oh my God, they left me alone to die. They didn't call 911. They didn't stay with me to see if I was going to live. And I think this is how survivors finally wake up. Thank God I woke up, because the average lifespan of a commercial sexual exploitation person is like 7 years, right? And so this was my big wake-up call. And I thank God every day for that wake-up call, because I just packed my bags and I left the state. And I never turned back. And I never told anyone this story. Until now. I'm just now coming out with my story. And my goal and my hopes is, if someone's out there listening, that one, you've either been through it and you can recognize, wow, I was trafficked, wow. Or if you are in it, then you can recognize that yourself are a victim and that there's hope. You can come out of it. This doesn't define you. It doesn't define me. And I have gone on and become successful. And so my heart is to help heal and give these girls hope, and these persons hope that they can go on. And so after coming out of that, I ended up going into a Christian community to serve with my life, because I had already, by the time of 20, been with 50 men. And I felt dirty, and I felt really bad, and had low self-esteem. So I wanted to serve God with my life. I feel like I needed to give back somehow, to pay back, to become a good person. And ended up going to a Christian community in South Carolina, which ended up being a Christian cult. And then I was there for 7 years and sexually assaulted almost weekly there.
So the cycle was still present, even
Yes.
though you weren't in the trafficking venue. That cycle of abuse continued. And I think that's part of what we do here at my house. We see a lot of that. The domestic violence cycle really echoes what you experienced, and a lot of abuse is anchored in that cycle of domestic violence. So teaching about that, learning about that, helping create support systems for people breaking away from that cycle, and really identifying what those triggers are.
Exactly. And that's my hope, and that's my goal. And that's why I was so thankful when you, Michelle, called me and said, I have funding, and that, can you come help us? And I'm like, I will do anything I can do to help with this issue. And so I'm really excited I really want to get curriculum into our public schools, K through 12, to teach them about the signs of being groomed, that when they can learn when they're being groomed, then they can save themselves and save others. And I really think that's where we're going to win this war. It's so important. I mean, these kids are being talked to online by predators daily. And it's really a really big issue.
Yeah, it's only getting worse online.
Right. But if we can teach kids nationwide, I mean, our state for sure, but nationwide, how to recognize it, go to a trusted adult and tell them, and then the adult turn this over to the FBI cybercrime unit so they can go after these people. And I'm so thankful, Michelle, that Governor Dunleavy had introduced these new updates to the criminal statutes that actually will deter buyers of sex, because on their third conviction within 5 years, it will be a Class C felony.
And they have to register as a sex offender.
Correct.
That's really where that to me, and we're going to have a heck of a time getting that passed. We're going to have to really work hard as a community to get people to agree to that, because of the nature of that crime. But if we can do that, the potential is there to really change the way that people behave and the choices they make around buying sex.
Absolutely. And also in that update in those bills was for the victims of sex trafficking, that they can actually have their records expunged from like prostitution charges or criminal charges that they obtained while they were under that influence of that trafficker. And I'm so excited about that part, because this part will help these survivors to move on, because then they will have hope. They can erase that from their lives, and they can go on to have jobs and homes and hold their heads high so they can be a part of their community. I'm just really excited about this part.
Well, I have to say, just in light of that I'm so proud of you just being able to come forward and share your story. I think it's very difficult, and I think that there's always a fear of being judged, or that people will perceive you in a certain way. And what's beautiful about you is you've been a part of our community and a part of the Wasilla Chamber and a lot of different very, very reputable businesses and employers and had ties all over the community. And I think it's really going to change the perception when people see that when you can get out of it, you can really make an awesome life, and that didn't reflect who you were on the inside. That isn't who you are today. And the passion that you have is really fueled by that, but it isn't that you don't have to carry that around every day and use it to as part of your identity. And so I'm really proud to have you as part of our staff. And I think, can I just share that you were appointed to a governor's advisory board that is going to be very influential also. And we need those voices and to get this legislation passed that will support recovery and increase punishments. So in 12 years of doing this work, I've never had a trafficker prosecuted. I've picked up girls in hotel parking lots. We've had girls come in. We've had volunteers pick them up from trap houses. We've had FBI interviews, state troopers, Wasilla Police Department. We've had all these groups that came to try to help. As long as they're under the influence of drugs, their testimony is considered compromised. And we've never in 12 years had a charge. So part of, there was a KTUU story recently that aired after the Super Bowl, and part of what the reporter was saying is that there's these new laws for sex trafficking, but there isn't really any evidence that there's a problem. There's only been 3 prosecutions.
Right.
The answer to that is that the reason there's only 3 prosecutions is because the laws are like Swiss cheese. We can't get anyone prosecuted. So if you use that as a measuring stick, then the laws will never change and there will never be any prosecution.
Right.
And so we really, this podcast and the information that we're sharing and the information that you'll be sharing as part of the ASHTA, the Alliance to Stop Human Trafficking in Alaska, and the Governor's Advisory Board are really going to be valuable for making those changes.
Heck yeah. I look forward to making those changes. It's about time. It's high time. And when we have so many people here, when they say our numbers, like, oh, it's not a problem here in Alaska, we only have 3. Well, I spoke to 5 clients a couple months ago, that one right after the other, that came into our business here at my house. And every single one of them had either been trafficked or know someone that's been trafficked here in Wasilla.
Right.
So it is an issue. And what I look forward to is law enforcement getting their training, more training for all of their people, so they can start recognizing the signs of trafficking instead of just always calling it, domestic violence or sexual assault. A lot of times this is trafficking. And if we can all, with the law enforcement and prosecutors and service providers, if we can all get on the same page, I really think we're going to see those numbers increase. And then we will realize that this is a problem in Alaska.
Staci, I want to back up for just a second, because I feel like both in North Carolina and also in South Carolina, the theme of how these situations happen are that they're brought into it by people or organizations that they trust, and that's a huge part of what happened. And I mean, my house is a secular organization, but we certainly have believers that work here. That being said, though, how many times in history have we seen people use religion as a guise to perpetrate atrocities like this? I mean, Jonestown, just as an example. Can we back up and just discuss, how you got involved in that organization in South Carolina, and maybe that'd help people kind of see maybe some warning signs when they're being brought in by organizations like this?
It's a very common thing. There's lots of stories on YouTube or even on Netflix of how people get into these, and it's quite simple. These people who are looking to bring in gullible, young, needy, vulnerable, with a lot of baggage, they bring them in, and that's how I was brought in.
Intentions, best intentions.
Right. Like I met this preacher.
Wanting to change your life.
yeah, and he was going to help me, right? And he saw potential in me. And there were so many things I could do, and I could serve God with my life. And I was such a holy little thing. And but his motive was not pure. But I was too young to see that. And so I was guilt-ridden from the life I had led and blaming myself. So wanting to serve God. So it was easy for me to say, yes, I will come down to your community. Yes, I would love to work side by side with you and work here in administration because that's what I was good at. And then it just turned into, he started, making advances and sexual assaults and then attempted rape. And then him preaching that it was my fault because I was worldly, I was seductive, my past, and basically that it was all my fault, that men could not stop doing that to me. And that's where the brainwashing came in. So there's a lot of brainwashing that goes into this. And then, just fear. It's all fear-based,
And isolation, bringing you into a community that then is difficult to separate from.
Yes, and I was unable to leave. They sold my car. They took my ID. So I was unable to leave for 7 years. And that's the isolation from family. Family was your enemy. So I stopped talking to my family, and the isolation for sure. Because you have no way out. You have no support system.
Right. We've seen that here in the Valley. We've had calls from family members who have said, we had a call from a young woman who said, my sister is being held and the people who are keeping her won't let us visit her. They won't let her go. They won't let her out of the house. She's trying to get messages to us. They won't let my mom go. And she was just turned 18. In fact, she started living there when she was 17. Then when she turned 18, they started turning up the intensity.
Right.
And so we had all kinds of adventures with that, but got her out of there. And I think that a lot of times people don't know where to go. They don't know who to call. They don't know where the connections can be made for people that can go in and say, no, you can't hold someone against their will. And it doesn't matter what your God connection is, right?
Right.
It's not, this becomes not about God. It becomes about kidnapping.
Yes.
And so.
Thank you for that clarity.
Right. Yeah. There's a misperception there that they're somehow going to, that God is somehow a part of this equation. Now, not all places that are recovery providers have that. It's certainly, we've got lots of partners and lots of church support. And in fact, I think the churches are some of our best supporters in terms of the trafficking programs because they are aware. They do see it worldwide, and they do have groups that go and help rescue girls on other continents. But I also think it's really important to recognize that it's happening right here, and that awareness. Having a curriculum that goes into the schools is really critical. The missing and murdered Indigenous peoples. In my mind, there's no way that's not connected to trafficking.
I honestly believe that is true.
We don't track trafficking the way that we should in order to connect it to the missing and murdered. But we do know that those, from a service provider perspective, those Alaska Native girls are considered exotic and high demand in other places. They go through the Anchorage International Airport and no one ever sees them again.
And boys.
Yes.
We have, I think our data for my house, and I could check with our data person, but I think our data shows we have just about as many young men who have been trafficked as we have young women.
Yeah.
That's very, very devastating and difficult.
And I think it's really difficult for the boys to come out and ask for help because it's just really embarrassing.
Well, and I would add to that a lot of times the recruiter, just like with you, is an older woman. And so if you think about a young man with an older woman who recruits and grooms.
Or older man,
that's seen as, that's the stuff of Penthouse Forum, right? That's the fantasy, the hot for teacher kind of thing where that older person is something that's sort of a conquest. So experiencing that becomes a badge of honor instead of the recognition of grooming and abuse. And I think you see that in some of the blogs and where young men are talking about the person who recruited them and groomed them, and the commentary from other men will be things like, yeah, I had that with my teacher, score. It was excellent. It was the greatest thing ever. And so I think we really have a double standard and a lack of recognition for what that really does and what it means.
And Michelle, that number is 6% of our clients have actually been trafficked, which may sound small to some people, but I believe that's based off of our active client list, which is 448 active clients, and 6% of that have been actively sexually trafficked.
That have come out.
Yeah, for sure. That have come out. Who knows how many more, just that they're not there yet. The trauma is too deep because it is a traumatic experience. And I think especially from the male perspective, there is such it's already hard enough being a victim of sexual trafficking, but as a man, I think that stigma there that if you have been sexually trafficked, that you're weak or less than is just amplified by 10 for sure, because it's not manly.
Right.
You were
Those
taken
layers,
advantage of.
There's so many more layers to that for a man.
Totally agree. Thank you for that, Isaac.
Yes.
That's insightful.
Yes, and I would just like to add really quick that most trafficking persons that end up in trafficking, they were either sexually assaulted as a child or they were introduced to porn as a child. And I really think that that's also an important thing to understand, is how damaging that porn can be to children when they easily come up on it now on the internet. But for me at age 8, it was so easy to come across just in my home. So I was addicted to porn by the age of 9.
Wow. So for me, frame that into a 2-year isolation with COVID, and then the increase in the number of porn sites, porn access, and internet porn available to youth, and just that complicates the issue so much more. Again, normalizing it,
Right.
normalizing that.
Yeah.
Especially in that isolation.
Yeah. So we have our work cut out for us. There's a lot we can do to help fight that. So.
Yeah. And Staci, I eager to know. I want to get back to your story of you were in South Carolina?
South Carolina.
For 7 years.
Yes.
So you were 27?
Yes, I just had my first baby there.
Wow.
Got married and had my baby there. So.
And so you were there for 7 years, and then what happened?
Yeah, so the reason that I ended up wanting to leave, well, for one, was I was really tired of all the sexual assault continually by the preacher. And then when my daughter was really, really young, he'd want to take her on walks around the property. And my heart would race, and I would just be so scared of what he was doing to her because of what he did to me weekly. And at that point, that's when I decided that I'm leaving. I can't do this. It's not stopping. The elders are not stopping it. Told an elder woman, and she's like, honey, let God have his way. Think about that.
Yeah.
So that was a hard pill to swallow, and I couldn't swallow it. And that's when I said, I have to leave. So we, at the time I was married, and so we planned 2 weeks in advance, and we would push our stuff out in a cart at midnight. And then we would roll all of that out to the road, our belongings, for like 2 weeks. And it was like super hot in South Carolina. We had no air conditioning. It was like 100 degrees. You'd be pouring sweat in the dark, looking for snakes as you're pushing your stuff out. So then one night at midnight, we escaped. And it's pretty traumatic, dogs barking and you're running through the woods, and I'm holding my baby, and we're trying to get to the road because we had someone picking us up at the road and put our stuff in the back of their truck. And it was really scary because this was right before the 2000 episode where, they thought everything was going to crash at 2000. Mm-hmm. So we're going out by faith, like, oh no, everything's going to crash when we're leaving. We have no support. We have no car, no money, no family because, we didn't talk to family. So we're basically almost on our own. And it was really scary because of all the fear and doctrine and all the preaching and stuff of leaving, knowing that I could possibly be damned and killed on my way out because God would be so mad that I left that place.
Right.
That's like straight out of a movie.
And so I am writing the book. And if you would like to hear the whole story, you're going to have to wait until I finish the book, and then you can read about it. But I'm just thankful. It was all really bad. The whole thing was bad, but I came out. But, I feel like I'm still a whole person, and that's why I'm just so excited to finally tell the world my story that I made it.
Yeah, you made it out and then some. So
Yeah.
what happened after that?
So after that, it's a long story after that. There's so many years involved because, I am in my 50s. So that was during, my late 20s. So there's a lot after that. But
Of course.
just getting to this point, this day, at this microphone, at the first episode of Redemption, telling my story, it feels like a Cinderella dream to me.
Awesome.
Well, thank you, Michelle, for sitting in today. I appreciate you just helping me tell my story and telling a little bit about the My House and then how we all kind of connected. Thank you, Julia, for being here. And I just want to say real quick, so if you or someone you know are a victim of sex trafficking, please call 1-866-733-7878. Or you can text HELP to 233-733. For local services here at My House, you can call 373-HELP. That's 373-4357. Remember, if you see something, say something. This is Redemption, loved and thriving. Until next time.